It's a debate that began amid the wreckage of the Federal Building in Oklahoma City 15 years ago this week and has continued in some form ever since. President Clinton tied that devastating bombing to what he called the purveyors of hate on the airwaves, and Rush Limbaugh was his chief target. Now they, along with other political figures and talk show hosts, are at it again.
Any future acts of violence are on your shoulders, Mr. Clinton. You just gave the kooks in this country an excuse to go be violent. Nobody on the right's doing this. Nobody on talk radio is advocating anything of the sort that you are predicting.
It doesn't make any sense. We shouldn't demonize the government or its public employees or its elected officials. We can disagree with them, we can harshly criticize them, but when we turn them into an object of demonization, you increase the number of threats.
Media template was established, the narrative was there. Bill Clinton and Obama blaming the Tea Parties for a future Oklahoma City-type bombing, which hasn't happened.
Joan Walsh, is it fair 15 years ago or now for Bill Clinton to blame the likes of Rush Limbaugh and other talk show hosts for, in effect, inciting violence?
Yeah, I think it is fair, Howie, and I think this whole debate about whether media figures are responsible or whether the debate is inflamed, it's an interesting discussion and debate to have. But the thing that it obscures is right now there is a climate of violence on the right. There are threats being made to Democratic lawmakers. I mean, Congressman Raul Grijalva had to close his office on Thursday because he was getting death threats. Patty Murray, senator from Washington. I mean, there have been.
But what is the link between that and people who make their living behind a microphone?
I think the link is that liberals are demonized in the most personal way. I mean, Rush comes out and has this wonderful op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal at the end of the week and saying, conservatives are protesting because we love our country. And unfortunately, the rhetoric of the right has all too often been they love their country and we on the left do not. We are traitors, we are un-American, we are unpatriotic. Obama is weakening our national defense on purpose.
A congress member said that.
Yeah, I have to disagree violently.
Don't be violent, Amy.
The political rhetoric across the spectrum can be so ugly. I think anyone in public life has been the target of it. I mean, I've been called the N-word and House N on multiple websites. When Tony Snow was stricken with cancer, I saw on left-wing websites people saying that they hoped that he died. There are kooks and there are nuts, and I think with Bill Clinton, it reminds us what we don't like about him, and that was the demagoguery. And I don't believe that Rush Limbaugh or any sort of right-wing talk radio person is responsible for this any more than an environmentalist is responsible for the Unabomber.
Christian Friedland, there's a certain surreal quality to this argument because no major act of violence, other than that nutjob who flew the plane into the IRS building in Austin, has taken place yet. It's almost like a preemptive debate.
Yeah, I agree. And I have to say on this one, I'm on Rush Limbaugh's side as well. I think that it's incredibly easy for politicians, for business people to criticize the media. In those Goldman emails I was telling you about that I enjoyed so much on Saturday, there's a great line where Lucas von Prague, the Goldman spokesman, is sending an email to his bosses, and he says, this story will have balance, and then he puts in brackets, i.e. something we don't like. I'm not accusing Rush Limbaugh of being guilty of too much balance, but I do think blaming the media is a very weak thing for politicians and business people to do. And I think we in the media should really be pretty careful before we agree with the criticism. Obviously, to openly call for violence is illegal. People shouldn't be doing that. But to just use heated language, I think you hear that on both sides of the debate. And on the left, you're hearing that a lot directed towards Goldman Sachs right now.
I'm not hearing death threats against people at Goldman Sachs, Christia, and I really object to this idea that
people at AIG felt like they were really under threat during the bailouts at AIG. I mean, there were people who said that they had to get guards for their homes and so forth.
And Congressman Eric Cantor from Virginia, he testified that he's gotten death threats as a Republican.
Oh, come on, that crackpot.
Hold on. The person who went to the Pentagon, who drove across the country.
You know what, Amy? Actually, Howie asked me the question. Howie asked me the question.
One at a time. Let me
and the person who went to the Pentagon, it turned out he was a pot activist. He was someone who grew pot on his balcony and wanted to legalize pot. But do we blame pot activists for that?
He was an all-purpose nut. He was an all-purpose nut, and the guy who threatened Eric Cantor also threatened President Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and the filmmakers who made the movie babe, okay? So, look, there are nuts on both sides, and we all can condemn them. But I think that the right makes a practice of a certain kind of demonization. Look, you guys, I went up trying to have a civil debate with Bill O'Reilly almost a year ago, where he told me I personally had blood on my hands. I got thousands, literally thousands of emails from people wishing that my mother had aborted me, that I had aborted my daughter. I have personally experienced the demonization of the right, and I think it is just of an order of magnitude different. You can go on comment boards on Salon or the Huffington Post. People love to do that. There's somebody anonymous saying something awful. But the fact is, the right makes a business out of incendiary rhetoric that personally demonizes Democratic lawmakers and pundits, and it doesn't happen that way on the left.
Brief response from Amy, and I need to move on.
I would say that it does happen that way on the left. I've read plenty of it about myself, about other people in public life, and unfortunately, when people get to be anonymous, they get to say very ugly things. The left is in power right now. The Democrats are in charge, and I think you always have more passionate rhetoric from the guys who are in the opposition.
Yeah, the anonymous comments.
You have militias too, and you have militias when Democrats are in power.
All right, I think we've established there's a lot of ugliness out there. Both Joan and Amy seem to have been recipients of it. This debate continued this week for at least a time on MSNBC. Commentator Donnie Deutsch was brought on to do a week-long series, Anger in America. Well, MSNBC pulled the plug after a few days. He didn't get to complete that series because of what we're about to show you. What he begins with is playing clips of different people who he portrays as being inflammatory, and one of them works for MSNBC.
Barack Obama is president of the United States today because of stupid, ignorant people who think like you do.
Embarrassed your district, embarrassed your state, embarrassed your party, embarrassed your nation, shouted at the president like he was a referee at a ball game and you were a drunk in the stands, and you were wrong.
When you guys get rid of Ed Schultz and Keith, then I'll start to think that you're actually serious here, because they are the biggest hate mongers in television.
But I'm not taking side of either one.
Amy Holmes, Keith Olbermann has said he did not complain about that show, but it does seem that criticizing Olbermann on MSNBC can be hazardous to your professional health.
Apparently, and Donnie Deutsch doesn't get to be a guest co-host on that show, but you know, it's pretty tough, I would say, just professionally, to go on the air and criticize your boss on the air, and that's kind of a dilemma that an honest journalist has.
Joan Walsh, maybe it was an unfair shot at Olbermann, who has occasionally apologized for being over the top, I think, after that clip, but why can't that be openly debated at a place like MSNBC?
You know, maybe it can be, but MSNBC, let's be honest, there was a time when there was way too much carping at, various hosts taking shots at other hosts. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't professional, and they decided to say, let's take a break from that stuff. And I think that's within their rights to do. Have a debate on the issues, and if people want to debate within MSNBC the issues, and they do, that's one thing. But I think they decided to have a different culture, and maybe Donnie Deutsch got caught in the middle. I also thought that it was a weird kind of show. Again, are we hyping there's anger in America? Are we going to get ratings?
They're talking about, well, maybe they are trying to get ratings. Christian, I've got half a minute. We don't get much of this on CNN because CNN doesn't have very opinionated partisans hosting shows, but is it realistic
so you're not about to criticize any of your fellow anchors, Howie? Let's see how...
I have done it. I had Glenn Beck on this program when he was an anchor. I have taken on Lou Dobbs when he worked for CNN, but my question is, we do that on this program. Is it realistic to expect most news organizations to engage in self-criticism?
I think it's not. I think self-criticism is one thing. If you are the editor, you can be self-critical of something that your organization has done because you choose it. What I think is really hard is to have your children publicly quarreling with one another.
Right. Okay, well, I think that the people at MSNBC take hard shots at a lot of other folks, and I don't think they should put their own people completely off limits. Amy Holmes, Joan Walsh, Christian Friedland, thanks very much for joining us this Sunday morning.